It's February 9th, 1836, in the brutal Montana wilderness, and a tough-as-nails trapper named Lars Ericson pushes open the door to his log cabin after 3 days out on the trap lines, only to find his partner, Henrik Tovold, a 31-year-old veteran of the wilds, stone-cold dead on his bedroll just 6 feet from a roaring fireplace that had burned all night long, wrapped in 2 thick wool blankets with his boots still on, following every survival rule in the book. Yet somehow the icy grip of winter had claimed him anyway. His face pale and frosted over like he'd been left out in the snow, and Lars stands there in shock, his breath clouding the air, even inside, realizing that their so-called shelter was no match for the killing cold that turned water buckets to solid ice and made every breath a battle. This wasn't just bad luck, it was a wake-up call that the old ways of heating a cabin were failing these men who braved the frontier. And as Lars drags Henrik's body to a nearby cave for burial, since the ground is too frozen to dig, he vows to figure out why death came knocking so easily, even with a fire blazing nearby, because if he doesn't, he might be next. And that's the chilling mystery we're diving into today, the true story of how one man's desperate invention changed everything for pioneers facing nature's wrath. Back in those days, the American West was no joke. With temperatures plunging to 40 below zero in what folks later called the year of killing cold, and trappers like Lars and Henrik were out there chasing beaver pelts for the fur trade, building rough cabins from whatever logs they could fill, stuffing the cracks with mud and moss, but heating them. That was the real killer. Most guys relied on a basic stone or mud fireplace jammed against one wall, connected to a chimney that sucked up smoke but also most of the precious heat. You'd burn through a cord of wood every 10 days just to stay alive, chopping and hauling in the snow until your hands bled. Yet the warmth barely spread beyond a tiny bubble right by the flames, leaving the rest of the cabin drafty and frigid. Floors so cold they'd numb your feet through boots. And Lars starts poking around after Henrik's death, doing these simple tests, like placing tin cups of water at different spots. Near the door they freeze solid in minutes. By the bed they get ice crystals in hours, proving the heat just rises up and vanishes. Wasted on the ceiling while cold air pools low and sneaks in through every gap. He visits other trapper setups and hears the same gripes. One guy named Bjorn Halvorson lost 3 fingers to frostbite without even stepping outside. A family packs up and leaves after their kid gets sick from the constant chill. Everyone's burning wood like mad, but barely surviving. And Lars thinks back to his roots in Norway, where his dad built root cellars that stayed steady, cool in summer, warmish in winter thanks to the earth's natural insulation. Then, at a trading post he sees this massive stone hearth that holds heat long after the fire dies, radiating it slow and steady because stones soak up warmth like a sponge and release it over time. That's the spark thermal mass, he calls it in his mind. The idea that if you could capture heat in something heavy and dense, it wouldn't escape so fast. So Lars hatches this wild plan to bury a heat pit right under his cabin floor, a sort of underground stove that would trap and store warmth, spreading it evenly without a fancy chimney. But when he tells his buddies, they laugh him off, calling it suicide, saying it'll fill the place with smoke or collapse underfoot. Yet Lars isn't deterred. He starts gathering clay from the creek bank in spring, mixing it with sand to make bricks, molding them by hand, drying them in the sun, brick by brick, over 200 of them by late April. All while the skeptics shake their heads, and as he stares at that growing pile, he wonders if this crazy hole in the ground will save lives or just dig his own grave deeper. But here's where it gets really intriguing. Lars waits for the ground to thaw a bit in early May. Then he grabs his pick and shovel and starts excavating right in the middle of his cabin, digging an 18-inch deep pit about 3 feet wide and 4 feet long, sweat pouring even in the cool air as he hauls out chunks of frozen earth, careful not to weaken the whole structure. Then he lines the bottom and sides with those homemade bricks, using more Class N mix as mortar, building walls that slant out just a tad to bounce heat up better. And he leaves these narrow tinge gaps at the corners for air to flow in and smoke to sneak out through the roof cracks. No big chimney needed, which saves a ton of work and heat loss. Finally, he covers it all with the original floorboards but makes the center plank removable so he can tend the fire. And on June 23rd, with his heart pounding, he lights the first test blaze using kindling and flint, watching as smoke curls up but then clears out thanks to natural convection. No choking haze like the naysayers predicted, and as the bricks start to warm, he feels the floor getting toasty underfoot, not scorching but even and gentle. Burning for 3 or 4 hours in the morning soaks the thermal mass full of heat, then it radiates out slow for 8 to 10 hours after. Using way less wood, about 60% less, and spreading warmth to every corner instead of just one spot. He tweaks it over summer, Learning hardwoods like oak work best for steady burn. Centering the fire prevents hot spots. And packing one air gap halfway with clay controls the flow to hold heat longer. By September, he's got a routine down pat. Morning fire to charge it up, then passive warmth all day and night. And as the first frosts hit, his cabin stays cozy while others shiver. But the real test is coming with that brutal winter ahead. Will this buried pit hold up when the mercury drops to killing levels? Or will Lars end up like Henrik, frozen in his own home? Lars had nailed the build, but now Mother Nature was about to throw her worst at him. And as the snow piles up in late 1836, temperatures nosedive to around 40 below. The kind of cold that snaps trees and freezes rivers solid. Trappers hunker down, but many don't make it. Indigenous folks and settlers alike lose loved ones to exposure. Cabins turn into iceboxes despite constant fires. Woodpiles dwindle fast. Folks like Bjorn burning round the clock just to keep from freezing. Running out mid-season and having to chop in blizzards, but Lars' pit system shines. One daily fire keeps the bricks radiating steady heat, holding the inside at 45 to 50 degrees, a whopping 40 degrees warmer than the howling outside. No drafts sneaking underfoot because the warmth comes from below, even and reliable. His water doesn't freeze, breath doesn't cloud, and he sleeps sound without piling on every blanket. Using just one cord of wood every 3 weeks instead of every 10 days, that's a game changer in the wild where hauling fuel means life or death. And word starts to spread when a trapper named Niels Anderson stumbles in during a storm in December, half frozen, and warms up in Lars's toasty cabbie. Jaw-dropping at the comfort, then Bjorn and Thomas Whitmore, the big mockers, show up skeptical but leave believers after feeling that 40-degree difference. Sticking thermometers in if they had them back then, but you get the idea. They beg Lars to show them how. And he does. No secrets. Helping the Richardsons and others dig their own pits. Using brick or stone depending on what's around, by 80 and 40 these underground heaters pop up across Montana and Wyoming territories. Trading posts adopt them. Even military outposts tweak the design for barracks. Folks call them Ericson stoves, though Lars never patents or brags, just teaches the principles of thermal mass to anyone who asks. How dense materials like clay or rock absorb heat, slow, and release it slower. Beating the old fireplaces that waste 75% of the energy up the chimney. This cuts fuel use by 60 to 70%, saves trees, reduces labor, and most importantly, saves lives in those harsh winters. The design hangs on into the 1900s, influencing modern radiant floor heating. But back then, it was pure survival smarts. Lars lives on till 1869, dying of pneumonia in Oregon, at a ripe old age for the time. His legacy warming cabins long after. Yet as peaceful as that sounds, there's a twist. Did this invention spark jealousy or conflicts among the trappers? Or was there more to Henrik's death that Lars never shared? Hold on, because while Lars's pit brought warmth and wonder, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Whispers started among some folks that maybe Henrik's setup was sabotage, or that Lars knew more about that fatal night than he let on. But nah, that's just frontier gossip born from envy. Truth is, Lars was a straight shooter, sharing his know how freely, and as the years roll on, his system evolves. Some add grates for better airflow, others line with river rocks. If clay's scarce but the core idea sticks, bury the heat source. Let the earth and mass do the work. It's like how ancient Romans had hypocasts under their floors, or Koreans with ondel systems. But Lars reinvented it for the American wilds, without knowing those histories, pure necessity driving innovation. And think about it, in a time with no electricity or gas. This low-tech hack meant the difference between thriving and dying. Families could stay put through winters instead of fleeing south. Kids grew up healthier, without constant chills leading to sickness. Economies shifted as less time chopping wood meant more trapping or farming. It's a ripple effect that helped settle the West. And Lars, humble as ever, just kept trapping. Marrying a local woman in 1842, raising kids in that same warm cabin, teaching them the pit's secrets. By the 1850s gold rush, newcomers hear tales of the magic floor stove and seek out old-timers for tips. Military scouts use portable versions and tents, lining shallow pits with hot stones covered by hides, staying warm on campaigns. But Lars stays out of the spotlight, content with his quiet life. Until that pneumonia takes him at 72. Buried with honors by folks who'd benefited from his ingenuity, his grave marker, simple, but his impact huge. And today, when we crank up our thermostats without a thought, it's worth remembering guys like Lars who hacked survival with brains over brawn. So if this story fired you up, pun intended, hit that like button if you've ever shivered through a cold night. Subscribe for more wild history tales that prove human smarts beat the odds. And drop a comment. What's the craziest survival hack you've heard of? Let's keep the conversation warm. As Lars's invention takes root across the frontier, it sparks a quiet revolution in how people battle the cold. But beneath the success lurks the harsh reality that not everyone adapts in time. Like the winter of 1837, when a late blizzard catches a group of settlers unprepared, their traditional fireplaces failing them, leading to tragic losses that could have been prevented with a simple pit. Yet those who listen to Lars thrive, building communities around shared knowledge, trading brick-making tips and wood selection secrets, turning isolated cabins into networks of warmth and wisdom. And as decades pass, the Ericson stove fades into folklore, but its principles live on in modern homes with underfloor heating, geothermal systems, even passive solar designs that harness Earth's stable temps, all echoing that 8-inch deep hole Lars dug in desperation, proving one man's lost, poor Henrik Bert, a lifesaver for many. And diving deeper, historians note how such innovations accelerated westward expansion, making harsh lands livable, boosting fur trade outputs, even influencing Native American adaptations as tribes traded with trappers and incorporated similar earth-based heating in lodges. Though credit often goes unassigned in those oral histories, Lars himself journals about it sparingly, more focused on daily tallies of pelts and provisions. But scraps from his notes survive in archives, describing the pit's evolution, like adding a metal grate for ash removal or experimenting with pit shapes for better heat flow. Rectangular works best, P finds. By the 1860s, as railroads push in, his design gets commercialized in cast-iron versions, sold at general stores. Though purists stick to handmade clay for its free cost and reliability, and emotionally, Lars carries Henrik's memory, visiting that cave grave each spring to pay respects, perhaps wondering if the pit came too late for his friend, but using it to honor him by helping others. A quiet redemption in the wild. And as we wrap this tale, remember, history's full of these unsung heroes whose stupid ideas changed the world. So if you're hooked on these stories of grit and genius, smash that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Share this with a history buff buddy, and tell me in the comments, what old school trick would you try in a modern survival scenario? Thanks for watching. Stay warm out there.